got over what I thought was my cold in Kentucky, and I wasn't on the ground 10 minutes and started coughing. So I know what the problem is.
You're allergic to
All of them.
Yeah, no kidding.
And probably fur pollen. So. All right, so thank you, Ross, for teaching class last week. Thank you for rushing right through that lesson. Appreciate that. Put me right back on schedule again. I'm taking long to get off again. So. But Ross had been preparing for lesson 9. I didn't finish lesson 8. And so you went into lesson 9 last week. So we're going back to lesson 8. So we're going back to lesson 8 and question 9, which is has to do with the Tower of Babel. Then I'm going to give you a little bit of a pop quiz and see how well Ross taught you on lesson 9. Just a few things that I wanted to make sure that you got. And then we'll get over into lesson 10. I don't know if we'll get there tonight or not, but we'll see. So let's begin with prayer. Our Father in heaven, thank you so very much for the good day. We're thankful for the safe arrival of everyone here tonight and for the health that allows us to be here. And we're thankful for the word that you have preserved for us and revealed to us so that we might understand you better, and know you better, and be able to see the very foundations of your plan that you prepared before the world was even created to save us through your Son. We pray your presence with us tonight. Help us to understand the things that were revealed and be with those who are unwell or traveling and away from us and keep them safe for us as well. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, question 9 is, what was the sin of the people at Babel from chapter 11, verses 1 through 4?
What was the what?
The sin.
Pride.
Okay, pride.
God said, be fruitful, fill the earth, and they didn't. They were staying together, nothing there.
Okay. And Sherry, what did you say?
Disobedience.
Disobedience? That's a pretty broad brush. That works every time for sin. Anybody else? Okay, so we read at the outset here to foreshadow what is coming in verse 1. The whole world had one language and a common speech. So everybody is speaking the same language. And what was that language? English. Was it Cockney or was it? Yeah, I don't know what it was. If I was to lean towards one, I would say Hebrew. But I don't know. We don't know what that language was. And that would be my speculation, though. And the only reason, why would I say Hebrew? Why would I lean towards Hebrew? What was this book originally written in? Hebrew. And so it's kind of like God's language. That's how he initially revealed his word. And but I don't know if that's the case or not. And so it says there, as people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. And so here's the answer to the question, and the answer to the question is, what did they say to each other? The answer to the question of what the sin is. What did they say to each other? Okay, so let's make bricks and bake them in a kiln, make them so they're strong and hard and so we can build things with. That's not a sinful thing to do. And the fact that they're going to use asphalt or tar for mortar to hold them in place is not a sin. But having provided the materials and bringing all of this onto the site there, what did they say?
Let's make a name for ourselves.
No, that's not what they said first. Let's build a tower that reaches to the heavens. And I remember hearing people say that that was the sin, that they're trying to build a tower to reach God. Okay. Let me ask you this. Is that possible? No. In fact, what's going to happen when you get pretty high if you build a really tall tower? What's going to happen? You're going to run out of oxygen. Then you're not going to be able to build any further than that. So it's not an attempt to reach God. This is a plan to build a tower that's what?
A home.
Well, yeah. Ross?
Well, this is not to be pedantic, but it first says build ourselves a city and a tower, and then it repeats the city and the tower. And I think what it's really getting at is this idea of like our own protection, our own source of strength, our own, like, this is where we're going to band together. These are like, this is the city, this is the tower, these are the walls, these are the fences. We're trusting in ourselves,
Right.
not in God.
Right. Well, and who else have we seen already in Genesis that has built cities?
Nimrod, Cain.
Yeah, all of the descendants of Cain. And we're on the other side of the flood, so there's no descendants of Cain. So it's not just Cain. So I hadn't thought about that, to be self-sufficient. But why would anybody want to build a tower? Josh?
It seems like a monument to themselves.
Absolutely. They want to build a tower that's higher than anybody else's tower. Any of you ever read the book, I think it's called The Great White City, about the World's Fair in Chicago? The Devil in the White City. And man, they are doing everything they can there to try to outdo the French in Paris and their Eiffel Tower. And I mean, that's just, and so whoever came up with the first answer that the first sin was pride is that. Okay, it's very much that. And so they're trying to make a name for themselves. And make a name for themselves so as what Mike said, so what? They would be big enough and they would never have to be scattered. They're not going to have to go anywhere. So the two sins are the sin of pride, making a name for themselves, and not be scattered, which gets back to Sherry's, the sin of disobedience, because God had said on more than one occasion, right after the creation, right after the flood, be fruitful and multiply and do what? Fill the earth. Fill all the earth. So that's their sin.
Isn't that kind of what we're doing now in modern day, that we're a skyscraper over?
Oh, it can be done, yeah. I think we've pretty much filled the earth. I mean, not to capacity, but there's people everywhere. But the reason there's people everywhere is why? Because God scattered them everywhere, okay? But yeah, there's still people building monuments for themselves. Sometimes they put their name on it. Sometimes they put their name on it, you know.
Yeah, Trump Tower.
There you go. And there's plenty of other people that have also put their names on towers. Okay, so what did God do to thwart their plans in verses 5 through 9? And before we answer that, what does it say there in verse 5? That's kind of interesting.
And the Lord came down to see the city and tower.
Okay, and in order to do what? In order to see what they were doing. Does that strike you as interesting?
Yeah.
There's, and I want you to catch the irony here in what Moses said. What are they wanting to do?
not be scattered.
And the first one, build a tower. And what did God have to do to see what they were doing?
He didn't have to come.
He had to come down.
He didn't have to, though. He chose.
Well, I know that, Fluffy.
But the tower was
I said this is the irony of it. They're trying to build this huge tower to reach to heaven, and what did God do to see what they were doing?
It wasn't tall enough.
It wasn't tall enough. He had to come down. It's not that he had to. It's the point.
Right.
The point is, you'll never get one tall enough that God will say, "Oh, neighbors, you know, do you have any Grey Poupon?" You know, they just hand it back and forth to each other there. And so he had to come down to see what they were doing. This is an anthropomorphic statement, so that we can kind of get an idea of a human-like expression. It's more prevalent in the South. Somebody says, "Come down and see us." Okay, that's not meaning that you're higher than they are or that they are lower than you. It's come visit. And that's kind of the idea here, because to show that God had an interest, that he had a judgment to make with regards to this, because God is all-knowing. He doesn't have to come down to see. So it's basically also presaging the fact that he is going to come down, but he's going to come down in judgment. Okay?
Dan?
Yes.
Something that comes to mind, when God visits Abraham, we're not there yet, later, before he destroys Sodom and Gomorrah, and two angels then go into Sodom and Gomorrah. I don't have it in front of me, but I feel like it said that he was going to see.
Yes.
If
He told Abraham, "We're going to go down and see if it's as bad as it says."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just see a parallel there.
Right. Very much so. That's exactly right. Good observation on that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just a question on verse 1. New King James says the whole earth had one language and one speech, with a footnote for speech of the lip. And is there, why does it say one language and one lip or one speech? Isn't that the same thing, or is there?
Oh, I think it's probably a bit of Hebrew parallelism, or one speech and one mouth. Or one speech and one tongue. Whatever, we use the lips, we use the tongue and throat for talking, and what we talk is the language, and so it's just repeating it. That's my guess. Yes?
The English Standard says one word, so they're all
For speech or for language?
in the same words.
in the same words.
Oh, the same words, so the same language, yeah. Yes?
Are we saying that Tower of Babel happened before Genesis 10? Because in Genesis 10 it talks about how they were separated into their lands according
Yes.
to
No, Babel happened before. What you have in chapter 10 is a running history, a preview of what's going to be happening. Yes, and so when you read there about the earth being divided and Peleg and the languages or whatever, that is presaging again what we're going to see. Okay, it's like you have you'll have genealogies that kind of run past where we are historically. All right, so what would having one language allow?
Close communication, stay close.
Okay,
Cooperation.
cooperation.
God said if they'll speak the same and think the same, then they can't fail at anything.
Right, he said, if as one people, this is in verse 6, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. And I realize that that's probably an overstatement, an exaggeration. But not much. I don't think it's that much. Because God is the one that gave us our brains and our intelligence and our reasoning ability. And if we can all share our separate strengths and reasoning, then that's going to be amazing. Did you all watch Artemis splash down?
Yes.
Because I did. It's fascinating. And then to see, if you see the graphic of Artemis taking off and whipping around the Earth and then taking off, and the moon's over here and coming up, and the timing had to be perfect. That Artemis gets there just as the moon, and it goes around that, and then as it's going and comes back. I have a hard time shooting a pheasant, when it's on the wing, let alone sending a rocket that's going to go and then go around another body and then coming back precisely. And that's, computers. When I was in grade school, if somebody said, you're going to have a computer that looks like this and you can just look up anything you ever wanted to, what I would say? No, that's not going to happen. So if we all had the same language all this time, God is just basically saying they'll be able to do just about everything. And again, it's overstating it, but he's giving the reason why he needs to stop it. Yes, somebody had their hand up. Tim.
My concept of God just kind of got blown away with it. He has to come down to see what's going on. I've always thought of him as being omnipresent, knowing all, seeing all.
Right.
So it changes.
So it's a figure of speech.
Okay, so it's more of a parable.
Right. So just to tell us that he is visiting and is interested and is going to come down in judgment, not to find out what's actually going and learn. Right.
Plus, he wanted them to feel his presence.
Well, I don't know if they did or not. They probably would right after. I don't know. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that.
I want to.
You don't want to? Because I'm going to put you right up there and explain it. So, again, God's plan for them was to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. That, again, is first stated in chapter 1, verse 28. Again in chapter 9 and verse 1 and 9 and verse 7. And we might even add, let me see if I can find it here. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah. Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God, neither of which these people are doing, because they're not doing what God wants. So the question is then, what did God do to thwart their plans? And what did he do? He confused their languages. So that what stopped?
Them being able to understand each other.
The ability to work together as a whole mass. They couldn't communicate with each other anymore. And it's not like every individual had a different language. Okay, so, there were different groups of people that would have shared languages. And I don't know how many languages were created here. I'm assuming that there were groups that, significant numbers of people that were sharing language. And how many of you ever been in a place, in a foreign country, where you couldn't understand anybody? Me too. Okay, when I went to China, if you've been to Japan, unless if you're by yourself somewhere out there, or even in Europe, for some of us who don't speak other languages, for all of us who only barely get through with our own language. So the first time I went to China, all the signs are in Chinese. It's not alphabet like I'm used to. Okay, it's kanji. And the people are speaking all of this language, and we were at a cafeteria the first day, and I saw some Caucasian people in the cafeteria, and I thought, at last! And I went over there and they spoke French. And I thought, I was really feeling pretty embarrassed. I assume that you speak English. And so what happened was that when you hear somebody who's speaking your language and nobody else is, you naturally gravitate towards them. And I think in regard to the history of language, written language followed the spoken language, the oral language. And the earliest forms of written language would have been pictographic, and we've talked about that before. Now, have you thought about how that worked? So yesterday you're all speaking the same language. You're all understanding everything. And you're understanding your history, and you can talk about what happened last week, last month, 100 years ago. You can talk about the flood if you wanted to, or you can talk about creation if you wanted to. But today, you can't understand other people. And the language that you're speaking probably is not the one you spoke yesterday. But what can you still do? Well, yeah, but what else? When you think about what happened last week or last month or the flood, what language are you thinking in? This new language that you've never spoken before. But it's just as you're thinking it's the same. You haven't noticed any change in your language. Everybody else is different. You're the one who, because of the way I think God you did this, you're the only one who thinks, at least within yourself, my language hasn't changed and yours may have been changed. That just fascinates me. Yes?
When I was a child, when I was like 8 or 9, my dad got very sick, and something was going on. They could not figure out what it was, but at one point he was speaking, but nobody could understand what he was saying. And it was frustrating to him. He remembers it, and it's frustrating to those around him because he thought that he was communicating. Maybe somebody who had a stroke might experience something similar.
Yeah.
But that's the closest thing I can think of.
Yeah.
Where like you are, how frustrated and how confusing.
Right.
That's the word that the Bible uses.
The first time out of at least 2 times that I think I can remember that Robin had a migraine headache. And I mean, it was just killing her. And I took her to the doctor, and they took her back into a room. And the doctor checked on her, and I don't know what they were going to do. And I walked in there, and she looked me straight in the eye, and she started saying numbers. 3, 9, 6, 4. And I said, what? 3, 9, 6, 4. I said, okay, sweetie. I'm going to step out of the room here for a second. Called the doctor, and I said, she's saying numbers. And he said, so she's speaking gibberish? And I said, if that's what the medical term for it is, that's what's going on. So they ordered a CAT scan. Now, when I talked to Robin later, she said, I was asking you, and she, in precise English, I said, did they take my watch? But she's talking in numbers. But what she was hearing in her mind was, did they take my watch? So that's my only experience with something like that. And of course, all the people that you understood yesterday, they're speaking gibberish now. And what's that going to do to your psyche and to your feelings of your general well-being?
You're going to want to be around those that you understand and get away from those that you don't.
Yes, fear. It's going to instill fear. Especially if you've got a group over here and they're speaking a language and they're looking at you and laughing because you're not speaking their language anymore. I wonder what's wrong with him. He's crazy, you know. And that just pushes you further away. And that just naturally moves people apart. Yes, Terry.
It reminds me of Proverbs, I think 16:9, in this situation where God came down and was like, this is what you planned, but I'm directing your steps.
Yeah.
So this is how it's going to go.
Right? Yeah.
It's like, I'll show you, this is what I'm planning.
And what an amazing, fascinating way to get it done. Instead of just picking people up and moving them everywhere, he did it so that they naturally scattered themselves. And the 2 results were they were scattered, which was, the prime directive. and they stopped building the tower, which was the monument to their pride. So he took care of both issues within that one thing. So why is it called Babel? Ross?
Well, Babel is Hebrew for confused.
Yeah.
And it's also weird that it's translated Babel here because everywhere else this word is used, it's called Babylon. So like this is what they were building is basically the big bad, the enemy for the rest of the Hebrew Bible. And even it doesn't say they stopped building the tower. It says they stopped building the city.
Right.
And it's again just like this city is this like the kind of manifestation of human pride and opposition
Right.
to God.
Well, cities are built so people can live in them in large numbers. And there's not going to be large numbers, so there's no reason even for that either. But I didn't realize that the Hebrew word is Babel. We just anglicized it. I mean, it's that word. So, which comes from the root meaning confusion. In the language of the Babylonians, this word means the gate of God. Bab-el. And God turned it into confusion. And the Babel episode was reversed when? You know this. When was Babel reversed?
Acts 2.
Acts chapter 2. When the gospel was preached and everybody heard it in their own language. And you have thousands that are coming to the Lord. And again, getting over to the minor prophets in Zephaniah chapter 9. Chapter 3. Zephaniah chapter 3 and verse 19 says that at that time I will deal with all who oppress you. I will rescue the father. I will gather the exiles. I will give them praise and honor in every land where they have suffered shame. In other words, I'm going to bring you all together as one people. All right. And a different translation, let me give you that, not out of the New International Version. For at that time I will change the speech of the peoples to a pure speech, and all of them may call upon the name of the Lord and serve him with one accord. Yes?
So, when God said, when the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, and then he said, that they're speaking. Anyway, who did he come? Did he come down to? Who was there?
I don't know. I don't know if he actually came down.
Go down?
Yeah, he could have come down in a form of a human. We see that when God is talking to Abram, and the two angels with him all take human form. They eat with Abram.
With him? Some angels maybe?
Yeah. So I'm not sure. Yeah.
It's kind of confusing.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's depicting for us so we can understand what's going on and get a picture of what's happening. So.
Dan?
Yes.
I think also that language, like you said, it's something familiar to us all. I think about when I was a kid and be with my brother and we're doing something my parents told us not to do. And they kind of would come down to see what was going on.
Right.
Knowing full well what was going on.
Right.
And knowing full well what they were going to do about
Right.
it.
Right.
And so it's just a very familiar, kind of personifies their
Right.
relationship.
Right. Tim?
This is just kind of anyway, one thing
You shouldn't preface your comments with saying this is way out there. Just
I don't even know how to preface it. It's just something that I've thought of is the fact that there's now the technology. I mean, I can go to a website that's in a different language and read it as my own.
right.
And I just think that if it were ever to happen, God would be unpleased where there was some person influence, whatever, that had captured the attention of worldwide, of the large population, to where they were all focused together as one mind in whatever message was being
Right.
sent. Because now it doesn't matter that the languages are scattered, you can still
Right.
have the capability of all knowing what it is.
Right.
And so I just think if that ever kind of thing happened, God would intervene. But that's just something I thought.
You know, it's almost like the flood in Babel, or is God pumping the brakes a little bit on humanity to kind of keep them in check. Yes?
And kind of to Tim's point, we have that technology, but we've never been able to mend the consequences of this sin
Right.
here. Like,
Right.
we've been scattered forever.
Right.
And quarreling about things forever.
Right. All right, so I'm going to give you some review stuff here real quick. And I want to go to question 4 on the lesson that Ross gave. And I said, what command and promise did God give to Abraham? So what was the command?
Leave your family, leave everything, and go to the land I will show you.
Okay, so leave your country, leave your people in general, and leave your father's house. Which means that you're heading out how?
Alone?
On your own. You're heading out on your own. And where is he going to go?
Where the Lord sends him.
Yeah, to a land I will show you. And the Hebrew writer says that he went out not knowing where he went. And what are the promises? What's the first promise?
Make you a great nation.
I'll make you a great nation. And that's going to be repeated 6 more times to Abram and Abraham in Genesis. What does that tell you about God? That he gave him this promise and then he repeated it 6 more times to him.
You can be sure it will happen.
Yes. And is giving him full assurance that it's going to happen. And in fact, if you go over to Genesis 17 and verse 5, he tells Abraham that many nations are going to come out of you. Not just a great nation, but many nations. And so you have the Edomites, you have the Ishmaelites, you have the Midianites, all of these other great peoples that came out of Abraham. What's the next one? Pardon me?
That he was going to bless him and make his name great.
Okay, and how did he express that? Those who,
Bless him, he was blessed.
and those who,
Cursed him, he was cursed.
what does that boil down to?
Whoever curses you.
We call that protection. If somebody's cursing you and God's going to curse them, what does that mean? That he's going to take care of the people cursing you. And if people are blessing you and God blesses them, what's that mean? You got friends, you got allies. So that's just really a big protective bubble that he's putting around Abram and his family. Those who curse you, I'm cursing. Those who bless you, I'm blessing. I'm with you, and I'm going to be with you and protect you and be a blessing to you. And then the last part of that blessing was what?
All people of the earth will be blessed through them.
Through your seed. Through your seed, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And so that's a promise with regards to the Messiah. Go to Acts chapter 3, and you see that in turning them away from their sins, the Messiah, the King, the forgiveness of sins is all a part of that. What did, question 8, what did Abram ask Sarai to do?
Pretend to be his sister.
To see
No.
the Egyptian.
Yeah, to just say that she was his sister.
To just say, because she was. She was his half-sister. So what was he not wanting them to tell? That she was his wife. Because you come into a land and the king likes the woman that you're with, and what does he do? He takes her. And may in the process do what to you? Kill you. Yes.
So in 12:1, go from your country and from your relatives, but he took Lot with him.
Yes.
Was that considered a sin? I mean, or could you say God approved that, or?
Well, he took Sarah with him too.
Yeah, true.
And Lot is probably his ward, because Lot's father has died. And so Abram has, I think, taken him under his wing and is helping him. Yeah. Yeah. Besides the fact that, according to, I keep wanting to go to Acts 7, but that's not where it is. Abram was told to go to this land while he was in the Ur of the Chaldees, not just at Haran. So he goes with his father. They go, and look at you. So he took his father with him too for a ways. Okay, and what does God want children to do with their aging parents? Take care of them. So I think that's what he's doing. They get to Haran, and they settle there. It says they settled there. I think they settled there because his father couldn't go any further, and so he's just going to wait until his father dies, and then he's going to go on. Is it confusing to you that they went to Haran and Abraham had a brother named Haran? They're not spelled the same in the Hebrew. So it's not confusing if you're reading Hebrew, but it is in English. Ross, you did a good job. Sounds like they got it down. What was the issue between Lot and Abram? Pasture and water, their flocks and herds were too great. And so what was the solution?
Separate.
Yes? Separate.
Well, Lot went to Sodom, or the Sodom side of the valley, and
Tell me what the agreement was.
Abraham allowed Lot to take first.
Yes.
Way they were gonna go.
Who's the guy that should get to choose first? Abram should. But he let Lot choose. And I think part of that is that we're getting an insight into Abram's character, the kind of person that he is, and the fact that he's trusting God. Yes, Terry?
Can I go back just a second? I was just whispering to Randy when he said, just tell him you're my sister.
Right.
So he told him a half-truth.
Yes.
And God still blessed him.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it. What came out of this deceit? Did he get to keep the bride price that he gave him to take her as his wife? Yes. He took it all and left. So I don't know I can't answer your question on that.
It's just something I always think about because in my mind, anything less than the whole truth is not the truth.
Right.
But seeing how God responded to this is just fascinating to me.
Right. Ross, and then Randy, and then Josh.
The unfortunate thing, though, is immediately what happens with all of that. Like, so he gets a whole bunch of sheep and oxen and donkeys and male and female servants and female donkeys and camels and stuff. Then what is the reason for the conflict between Lot and Abram?
Yeah.
Is the amount of livestock, all the riches.
Right.
So it kind of seems like these are pretty ill-gotten gains,
Right.
and now they're causing
Going to cause even more problems.
They're causing strife,
Right.
and so then if you follow that thread, well, Lot goes to Sodom, that ends up really bad. Then when they leave Sodom, then there's the whole situation with Lot and his daughters, and that's where Ammon and Moab come
Right.
from, and those nations are fighting with Israel
Right.
forever.
Right.
And so it's like from this one sin of telling a half-truth, you get perpetual generations of warfare between
Right.
relative countries.
Right. Yeah, the same thing with the plan of Sarah to use Hagar, and now you have the Arab nations coming out of that, and just fascinating. It's fascinating history. Randy?
No, just to address that, Abraham is listed in Hebrews 11 as an example of faith, of the great cloud of witnesses.
Right.
And so is David, who
Right.
committed adultery and murder.
Right.
And so I don't think God is overlooking this half-truth, and like Ross mentioned, the the ramifications and
Right.
the consequence
Right.
of that is clearly seen. I think it speaks to the inspiration of scriptures,
Right.
because if men were writing this, they would.
Oh, yes.
You would not see any of the.
You see nothing but
in the armor.
Abraham's star on the Walk of Fame. You wouldn't see any of the tarnish on there at all.
And it's
That's right.
This record is here as an example for us, but
Right.
it also shows God's grace.
Right.
that even,
And mercy. Yeah.
even through that, God still blessed Abraham.
Right.
And David also had strife in his house.
Yeah.
After that.
Yeah.
as
Well,
So-
David is a man after God's own heart.
Right.
Abraham is a friend of God. I mean, amazing. Yes. Oh, let me go to Josh.
Yeah, I was just gonna say something similar. Like, still what you get is that God kept good on his oath to Abram, despite some of the things Abram was kind of doing that were really, really complicated the
Right.
situation.
Right. And listen, all through this, just to add to that, don't we see Abraham's true character? I mean, yes, he had slips, he had foibles, with that. In fact, he's going to do it again with Abimelech later. And so is Isaac going to do the same thing. But, I mean, that pales a lot compared to taking your son up on a mountain and being willing to sacrifice him because God told you to. So, yes, Terry.
It's just, I think, a reminder too that God uses imperfect people to accomplish his will.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder to us to not be so quick to judge those imperfect
Right.
people that he may be using,
Right.
even in our own community.
Right.
We don't know what the ultimate plan is.
Right. Exactly.
And we are those imperfect people.
Yes, we are. We are. John?
I know that God probably could have dumped Abram and started over. We'll have to ask him why he stuck with Abram the way he did. But at this particular point, he's kind of locked in with Abram being the beginning of the lineage that would lead through his chosen people,
Right.
through the law, and eventually to
Right.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So he's got Abram,
Right.
and he's got to work with him.
Yeah. I'm not going to be asking that question. I'll just let you know I'm not going to whittle on that end of the stick. Mike?
Well, God knew the future, and that's the way I look at this. He knew what those choices would be, and he knew what the consequences, because he could look forward in time and
Right.
see what those things, and he knew that it would work out the way he
Right.
wanted to. And that's why he could tell us hundreds of years beforehand what would happen.
And you have Jesus saying, Abraham saw my day and rejoiced. So he had a great character about it. Is there any other?
Yeah, I
Yes.
was just going to add one thing to that I am thankful that God shows those foibles and those mistakes that some of the greats of our history know he showed that, because then I can forgive myself when I'm not perfect in my following of God. I can say, well, I shouldn't have done that. Please, God, forgive me, and know that He will, because He forgave those things. And
Right.
still, we see David as a man after God's own heart. We can still be that even
Right.
when we make these mistakes. So
Right. Right. Exactly. Yes.
You know, you look at it, none of these deeds kept him from fulfilling salvation that he had planned from the beginning. In fact, it's exactly what he wanted.
Right.
And so he used, like Mike was saying, he used men to get where he wanted to be.
Right. Well, again, and God's not whitewashing things. I mean, that's what Randy's bringing up. And in fact, Paul said these things were written for what purpose? For our learning and our admonition. And for our encouragement. But Randy, you had one other comment or no?
Well, we've mentioned David. I know we're close to, or right on the end here, but David says in his psalm, "Restore to me the joy of your salvation, uphold me with your generous spirit. Then I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners shall be converted to you."
Right.
So here, this is David
after his horrible sin.
Bathsheba
Yeah.
and murdered her husband.
Right.
And he's saying that, my joy can be restored, and you can use me to help
Right.
teach others.
Right.
So.
Okay, so we will start lesson 10, Abraham and Lot, next week. Thank you.